We're here in Austin, Texas for the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association's 2018 conference titled Save the Vape and Save Your Butt. And I'm with Mark Anton, Executive Director of SFATA. How's it going, Mark?
It's going very well, Brent. Thanks for having me.
For our viewers who don't know much about SFATA, and it's been a couple of years since we've talked to you guys directly about your initiatives. What's going on? What is it?
As you mentioned, it's the Smoke-Free Alternative Trades Association, and we are an organization that represents vape stores, vape manufacturers, and also distributors. And so we're currently engaged in a number of aspects. We met with Commissioner Gottlieb and the FDA back in April of this year, and that led to a number of significant points that we found were critical to the FDA. And because of that, we have made the decisions to address a number of them. One is NAVA, the North American Vaping Alliance, and that is to work on developing standards for the industry, whether it be in manufacturing of liquids or manufacturing of hardware, or even regulations that deal with the vape stores and how the vape store addresses their clientele. The second thing in that was we realized that we have an issue with the youth issue in the United States, which the commissioner has called an epidemic. We don't see it as an epidemic, but we needed to address it. And SFATA has always been a lead in this particular category. We have addressed the age to vape since 2014. So the YEP program is just a natural extension of what we do, and it stands for the Youth Education Prevention Program, and it's to both help educators and parents talk to their teens about the risks and or non-risks of vaping, what it actually is, what it means to them. And then the third thing is Save the Vape program, which is the keynote name for this conference. And Save the Vape is really geared around developing a PR campaign, because at SFATA we realize that we talk to ourselves. And what I mean by that is we talk to other people in the vapor space, we talk to consumers in the vapor space, but it's the soccer moms, it's the people who are outside the industry that don't understand what our industry really is and how it helps bring families together. So that is really what we're trying to do, is raise funds to put a campaign out there so we can start to educate the consumer, the non-consumer, and hopefully the politicians, and they'll start to see this, because we are fighting a significant amount of money from those who are in the tobacco control sector.
So you mentioned Commissioner Gottlieb, Mark. On November 15th was the big announcement with regard to restricting, so to speak, some vaping devices targeting teens. I wonder, do you think that this was a good thing? Was this good news that came out of the announcement?
Well, in everything there's good and bad. The question is which way do you look at it from? What perspective do you have? So from the vape store's rationale, it seems like it might be a victory, because Commissioner Gottlieb certainly leaned to the point that the open space category was not as big of an issue as, say, Juul was. But from the other side of the aisle, and I've been in this business a long time, it's always been about having access for adult smokers, right? So in that regard, I think that his restrictions can have more detrimental effect for public harm. I heard Commissioner Gottlieb ask Greg Connolly from AVA when he was on Axios. He kind of did a little surprise question for him, going, how many teens is an acceptable teen to be vaping? And I look at it a little bit differently. My question to Commissioner Gottlieb would be more along the lines of, what is an acceptable level of how many teens smoke? Let's start there first, and then move over to the other subjects. Let's address the smoking issue first, and then go over to the vaping segment. I think we're looking at it backwards from the FDA's perspective.
Right. Well, FDA just re-upped with their ad agency, SCB, this year, and those are the ones that are responsible for the great all those great,
all those worms
the
and,
worm ads and
yeah.
the epidemic and virus and all that stuff.
I'd love to see their scientific basis for those worms.
Well, that is quite true. $615 million is the contract for 5 years. That's over $125 million a year. And that's just FDA. That's not including Truth Initiative or Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, American Cancer Society. That's just FDA. So you have to imagine there's nearly $500 million that's being spent over the next short period of time.
That's a staggering number, and I have to question the intent of the FDA on that, because, you know, they've approved the worms on the brain, they've approved the things in the necks to try to make a dramatic effect, but there's no scientific evidence that nicotine causes any of these things. There's no particular aspect that you know, leads a doctor, and Dr. Gottlieb is a doctor, and they've admitted that they caused harm to adults, because the adults, they saw an unintended consequence.
How do you mean?
Well, they explained it at FDLI. They said that those ads actually affected adults in a negative manner towards vape. So they could effectively be discouraging smokers who are adults.
Well, let's just say they are.
Who might have actually switched.
Right.
So as a doctor, he has an obligation to do no harm, first and foremost.
So I happen to have a quote right here from an NBC article that was done on September 18th, just on the FDA's launching of that campaign. And Kathy Crosby from FDA said to NBC that the ads were shown to focus groups, including a group of adult smokers who want to quit. She said they made these smokers cautious about trying e-cigarettes as an aid to stop smoking combustible cigarettes, so FDA will not be running the ads on mainstream media.
Okay, so how does that prevent adults from seeing it on the social medias and where kids are? So they're showing it to children, and then the children share it on their social media. What, their parents aren't friends with them?
Isn't there something crooked here when you've got hundreds of millions of dollars being spent to skew public perception against vaping, and when you apply that messaging to teenagers, it's righteous, but if adults happen to catch that same message out there with all that money, it could prevent them from quitting smoking and like choosing e-cigarettes and quitting smoking, which could kill people.
Yes, and that's reprehensible. And a doctor should have the utmost care when he's dealing with any patient and or his charge. And in this case, Dr. Gottlieb's charge is the FDA and the American public's health. So you can't play games with that. And that, to me, is something that we really should hold his feet to the fire, because it's now political rhetoric versus good science. And the science is what the FDA touts to be about. And you mentioned that letter of his. He also mentioned some very personal anecdotes in that letter to start it off. The issue with that is when we use personal anecdotes, they can't use that for anything. But he can use it for empathy, he can use it for sympathy, he can use it to try to frame narrative before you start reading his decisions. So the question is why?
So we're here at this event, this SFATA event, and I'm here obviously because RegWatch supporters have asked us to be here, and this is great. We get a chance to talk with you.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Now, just down the road, tomorrow, is VTA.
Sure.
The Vapor Technology Association. How is it that they have their conference in the exact same city, the exact same time? You guys not talking together, coordinating?
Well, I would suspect that there's, you know, I look at it as an opportunity, whether it's at the same days, remotely the same. I was more concerned because both of us were here, and on the 5th of December was the FDA meeting that was set up after our conferences were set up, where they want to talk about putting kids on drugs to get them off of vaping. What the heck? I mean, who's running the asylum? I'm sorry to say it that way, but it makes no sense. They've approved nicotine as a replacement therapy product. We use the same nicotine. They allow children access to that because they found there's no harm. But yet in our products, it's the end of the world. Why, I don't know. And that's something that Commissioner Gottlieb needs to be asked that question. But getting back to the conferences.
Well, the issue about that is if you're on the outside and you peer in and you see that the two top trade organizations, which essentially representing the same types of members, right, are not working together, and so much so that they're competing with their annual conferences at the exact same location.
Well, I get that appearance, and some may look at it that way. I looked at it and said, all right, so what do we do with this, right? I mean, we can't change it. They can't change it. So I reached out to the leadership over at VTA, and I invited them to come have a meeting with us here at this conference before theirs gets kicking off, right? So that we can get on the same page, you know. And it's not just VTA; it's AVA, it's AIMSA, it's CASA. So if we can get all of the, you know, trade associations that deal on the federal level together, we can have high-level meetings. We can discuss how we can do this together, because really the industry is screaming for that. But yet at the same time, the industry does kind of have a little bit of a propensity to separate itself for one reason or another. But if we're going to have success, if we're going to deal with the FDA that we need to deal with it, we have to do it together.